and tell the story of LBJ and how he massively increased the number of people that we had serving in Vietnam. And LBJ had said before he became president, we're not going to send American boys 3,000 miles away or 8,000 miles away to go fight a war that Asian boys ought to be fighting for themselves. He did not want us to escalate in Vietnam. He had made that pledge very publicly. And he felt like it resonated when he told people that. They liked that he was saying that, and he wanted to be able to keep saying that. But then once he was president, he got convinced that he did need to send a lot more American boys to go die in that war. And so he was in this sort of quandary of wanting to do it, but really not wanting to talk about it. And what he decided to do, and he agonized over it, you can hear him agonizing over it on the tapes, right? Because they've released all the tapes now. So some of the transcripts of those tapes are in the book. But you can hear him agonizing over it, and he says he doesn't want to go talk to Congress about it. He doesn't want to go do a joint address to Congress. And what he definitely doesn't want to do is he doesn't want to call it the Guard and the Reserves. Because the Guard and the Reserves were where a lot of people who had connections got into to try to avoid service. Yeah. And so, not everybody, that's not how it worked for everybody, but in some cases, if you called up the Guard and Reserves, that was going to be when your local member of Congress started getting calls from all their prominent constituents saying, are you kidding? I got my son this plum spot in the Guards who couldn't have to go, and now you're calling him up? So he thought the calling of the Guard and Reserves would be something that would very much upset people with a lot of political capital. So he said, you know what, I'm going to do it without having to talk to Congress about it, and without letting the country know that we are calling up this many more people. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to double my draft calls. Because he thought a draft was actually a way that you wouldn't bother people. Because the only people who would get drafted were people who didn't have the political capital to not get drafted. And so he thought, well, we will draft everybody, nobody will mind. I'll get my bodies to send to Vietnam, and I won't get calls from prominent constituents. So the draft worked in the opposite direction, as an accelerant in that case, rather than as a break. But at the same time, like, the arguments for having everybody have so-called skin in the game right now are good arguments. I was moved by what General Stanley McChrystal said about this, actually, because for so long, what we've been hearing from the military is that they really do not want the draft. The military itself does not want the draft. The military does really, really hard, technical, in some cases, ambitious work, and the last thing they want is a lot of people filling out their ranks who don't want to be there. So the volunteer force, the military has been saying for a generation now, is what they want. They do not want to go back to the draft. Volunteer military is a better military. But when General McChrystal was the counterinsurgency guy, and then he was running the war in Afghanistan, and then Michael Hastings wrote that article about him swearing and talking smack about Joe Biden, and then he quit. Right? He came back and wrote this book, and the book isn't about this, but in doing interviews about the book, he said, you know, I didn't used to be somebody who believed in the draft. I came into the Army in the wake of Vietnam, and the last thing that we wanted was the draft. We're so happy to tell him I felt that way my entire career. But now, coming back after 11 years of deployments to a country that has no idea where any of us have been, or what any of us have been doing, I am starting to feel differently about it. And not because it's in the military's interest, but because it's in the country's interest. And that is moving. I see both sides of it. I think the bottom line is that it's no magic bullet. That ultimately the reason that we crave a draft, is because of that disconnection that we're feeling. There's lots of different ways to address that disconnection directly. And a draft, if you did it alone, might not solve the problem.
Just to keep I need to go man the table to give books out to people who did not pick up their books on the way in. And give Rachel a chance to have a swig of water.
Actually, we'll do a Mark Rubio style.
Do you think Dick Cheney will ever agree to be interviewed by you?
questions get asked. I mean, you know exactly what he's going to say. Here's the bottom line, he doesn't feel bad. The more interesting questions, and not to take anything away, but I thought that was a great documentary, but the stuff that I want to ask him about, I want to ask him about, you know, Iran-Contra. I want to ask him about when he made that decision that ended up having such big consequences decades later about outsourcing the military. Did he know, what could he foresee then when he did it? You know, and when he saw Democrats implement the policy with such enthusiasm, did he think they were doing it right? The Iran-Contra stuff in particular, I think, is really important part of Dick Cheney's history. When he was vice president and reporters were asking him about some of the Bush-era, post-9/11 national security radicalism, the expansion of executive power that they demanded, he told reporters on his plane, if you want to know my thinking about this, go read the minority report from the Iran-Contra investigation that Congress did after Reagan got busted. Reagan got busted. He really got busted. If your president is Bobby Bush, you should go look up the Iran-Contra Wikipedia page, seriously. Or read this. But when Congress did an investigation of what Ronald Reagan had done, they essentially said, oh, Congress knew you wanted to go to war in Central America because you kept saying you wanted to go to war, and our answer was no. We passed a law that said you can't do it, and then you did it anyway, secretly? Good. It was very bluntly illegal behavior. And when now we think of him as Saint Reagan, at the time it was like, is he going to be impeached? And, you know, it was a very serious thing. He's been reimagined in a bunch of girls he didn't like. when Congress put out that bipartisan condemnation of what had happened in Iran-Contra, the defense secretary got indicted, and it was a big deal. There was a dissent. And the dissent, which I would not have known about had Dick Cheney not told reporters to go look it up, but I found the last copy that existed on eBay that day. He filed a dissent. Congress said, you wanted to do it, we knew you wanted to do it, we passed a law to make it illegal for you to do it, you did it anyway? You fought a secret and illegal war over the overt contravention of Congress? Are you kidding? Dick Cheney filed a dissent that said, actually, it's okay by me. If it is a national security matter, if the president does it, it is not illegal. And he called upon reporters covering the post-9/11 White House to look at that as an example of his thinking on these matters. And I would like to talk to him about his thinking on these matters.
I wish we could go on all night, but we need to let you get going. You've done heroic work tonight.
One more.
When the world has got you down and weary, what tune do you sing to chase away the blues?
That is a great question. I have actually been on, you know the jazz standard, Blue Skies?
Yes.
That's sort of been my thing recently, and I don't know why. No. I do love you, but not like that. So I've been, Susan and I have both been on kind of an Ella and Oscar kick recently.